Hey guys, we're going to be checking out a YouTube video today titled Job Security is Dead and Nobody Cares. This video I feel is applicable to me since I was recently laid off a few months ago. So let's check out the premise behind the video and see if it's accurate or not.
Jobs are not what they used to be. The average time an employee spends with their company is now at the lowest level ever, and that's by design. We have gone from full-time to part-time to casual to gig work, lowering the expectation of a long-term professional relationship every step of the way. If this didn't do enough, studies have shown that many workplaces are now intentionally promoting the fear of job losses in an attempt to motivate workers and keep costs down. But this is
Okay, so I agree with that premise. What he's saying is people, or rather workplaces will hang that threat of having a layover to spurn its workforce to be more productive. And if a layoff does happen, for example, the first round of layoffs, the people that are left behind are forced to pick up the slack of everyone who were let go, right? So basically you're taking on more workload, and also you're trying to prove to the company that you're valuable and they should not lay you off from that job. So it's already a stressful situation, and then on top of that, you have to pick up more work. So it's demoralizing, but it's an effective way to get more productivity. So I agree with that premise.
usually a really dumb idea. The death of job security is bad for workers and bad for companies, but nobody cares anymore.
Well, I don't know about that. Well, I care about that. Companies should care about that. Yeah, if you have a job, then you would care about something like that. I mean, a job loss is a job loss. That's a huge part of your life. Right? You got to pay rent. You have bills to make sure that you're current, and you got to feed yourself, family. Right? You have a car note.
We have immediately seen, Andrew, layoffs. We have seen price increases, so that's inflation.
Teachers and staff at schools from coast to coast could soon be out of the job.
15 million new jobs in just 3 years, a record.
Mr. Musk said the company would look to reduce headcount by around 10%.
That reduction of 10% by Musk, I was part of that 10%.
Piling up this year, and we're just a few weeks into 2024.
Up until the 1980s, it wasn't unusual for workers to spend their entire professional careers working with just one company. Company loyalty was highly valued by both employers and employees, and
That's true. If growing up, you'd hear your parents tell you, "Hey, find one company, you work with them, and then you retire." So ideally, you'd only have maybe right after high school, you find a summer job, and you go to college, pay your way through college, and then after you graduate, you find that one job that you really like, and you stick with that company until you retire. You might have a career change once or twice at most, but as growing up and moving through life, I've found that that's not the reality anymore. You tend to pick up a new job every few years, and I'm a millennial. I'm knocking on 40s now, and that thought of having just one job for the rest of my life is a distant possibility now, unless there's an awesome job out there that you find. Maybe a few people get lucky, but for the majority of people nowadays, you tend to hop around jobs.
the threat of getting laid off or fired was incredibly low. If you ever watch old films and see someone getting fired as a major plot point, just remember it actually was a big deal back then.
Third prize is you're fired.
If you get fired, it's still a big deal today. I already mentioned, hey, how are you going to pay your bills if you get fired? For people who have been let go or got fired from their job, it's not something you take lightly at all. It's a devastating thing. Unless it's one of those, summer jobs, you're in high school, you don't have a lot of responsibilities. But if you are career driven, having a job loss is devastating.
But according to data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, those days are long gone. The average tenure of young employees these days is less than a third of the baby boomers exiting the workforce. I don't want to sound too old here, but back in my day, people actually cared about losing their job. But today,
No, we still do. We still care about losing our jobs. If you don't, let me know on the comment section. I'd like to hear your point of view.
fired or laid off from your company just makes good content to post on TikTok. This is a bad trend for companies because it takes away their biggest stick. The fear of getting fired is always going to be a motivator in the workplace. There really is no way around that. If you don't do your job or cause too much trouble for the company, you are going to lose your job along with the pay and benefits that come with it. But as the great Peter Gibbons would say, that will only make someone work just hard enough to not get fired. The death of job security means that people just expect to lose their job at some point in their career these days. But there are
I agree halfway with the statements. Now that I got laid off for the first time in my life, it really opened up my eyes to the reality of working for corporate America. It's really true when they say that they do not care about you. They really care just about the company and the bottom line. So if you're watching this, if you're Gen Y, Gen Z, and I'm sure the older generation will tell you the same thing, that they do not look out for their employees. They look out for their bottom line, for the company. That I agree with. I don't agree with when they say that no one cares about if you get laid off or you get fired.
There are 3 big reasons why it was allowed to get this bad, and 3 reasons why nobody really cares anymore. The first reason is that companies give up on training their own staff. There is an old joke about company staffing that goes something like this. The CEO and head of HR are arguing about the cost to train staff. The CEO asks, "What would happen if we spent all this money and they quit?" To which the head of HR responds, "What happened if we don't spend the money and they stay?" But as more people move jobs more often, the CEO's argument is actually starting to make sense. Research conducted by Peter Capelli, the director of the Wharton School's Center for Human Resources, found that the time and money spent on staff training within companies has fallen drastically.
Okay, he has a point here. When I worked at Tesla, the training that was provided to me, it wasn't. They didn't have like a standard operating procedure as far as training new employees. At least the department that I worked at, they basically just threw you in the deep end, and it's sink or swim. And that was a pretty common phrase under the leadership that I was at. It's sink or swim. Whether you are a new hire or if you are a temp worker or seasonal trying to secure a permanent position, but there was no standard operating procedure as far as training when I was there.
In 1979, the average worker received 2.5 weeks on the job training every single year. By 2004, it was just 11 hours, and most of that was safety training, not developing new skills. A more recent follow-up survey conducted by the same team in 2011 found that only 1/5 of workers received any on-the-job training at all within the last year. Companies don't want to train people because they are leaving their jobs more frequently than they used to, so they are only willing to hire employees that are already able to do the job. Standardized systems have made this a lot easier for them to do. If you are a professional office worker, it's almost a prerequisite to have a basic proficiency in Microsoft Office, especially Excel. And
Yeah, that's true. On your resume, you should have proficiency in Microsoft Office, Excel, Outlook. That's pretty standard nowadays. You should still put that in your resume, even if you don't have set proficiency. It would be detrimental to you if you don't have those skills. And they're easy to learn. You can pick it up on the way on your job if you're not an expert. But yeah, that's pretty standard.
Every profession now has its own industry standard productivity programs. If you are a creative, you use Adobe Suite. If you are in sales, you use HubSpot or a comparable CRM. And if you're in marketing, you need to know your way around a box of crayons. Oh, and the advertising analytics backend of Google, Meta, and LinkedIn. Since these skills have become the standard for all employees, companies can hire people that are already ready to work on day one, where in the past, they would need a lengthy training program on the unique in-house systems of that particular company. But standardized programs have also meant that people can find a new job that they are qualified for with less barriers, which means they switch jobs more often, which means companies invest less into training unloyal staff, which creates even more need for industry standard systems.
It's like a Ferris wheel, right? So you go to a job, you learn a certain set of skills, and you move on to a new job, and that new company will look at your skills that you learned from your previous employment, and they'll just hire you right there because, hey, this guy already has these sets of skills. We don't have to spend as much money training this person because this individual already has a skill set, therefore saving the company time and resources.
The ultimate incarnation of this trend is platform-based gig work. The professional relationship for this kind of work lasts as long as the app is running, and writers often work between multiple apps at the same time to maximize earning and minimize downtime. If you want to get ahead in a professional career these days, I'm sorry to tell you, but you are going to have to invest some of your own time and money into training yourself, even if it's just to tick a meaningless qualification box. Companies aren't going to train you anymore, which means if you quit or get laid off, it's not as big of a deal for either party. But
It's still a big deal, at least for the people who are getting fired or laid off. For the company, maybe, see, here's what's wrong with corporate America. They, as I mentioned earlier already, it's all about the bottom line. They don't give a fuck about their workers. They'll tell you that they do. It's bullshit. It's bullshit. Don't fall for it.
decline of on-job training is just the first reason. So it's time to learn how money works, to find out why job security is dying, why nobody cares, and what happens when nobody has a job for long enough to be good at it. This week's lesson is sponsored by Manscaped. Just in time for Father's Day, Manscaped introduces the must-have gifts for every dad. Meet the Handyman and the Weed Whacker 2.0. First up, even if they were the ones that caused it. The simple fact is that when you get a new job, you aren't going to be very good at what you do until you learn your new role. Standardized systems have made it easier to transfer basic competencies between companies, but even little things like who you talk to about authorizing your expense reports, the names and faces of clients, or how the office printer works, they all take time for new people to learn. According to a study conducted by Gallup, a business analytics company, it takes the average employee 12 months before they reach their full performance potential in their new role. Other studies have suggested that new employees are not fully autonomous in their responsibilities for the first 18 months of their employment.
Okay, 12 months to be comfortable with your new job. I agree with that. It takes that long. Sometimes if you are totally new to the position and you're learning, all the skill set that you need to do to perform in an acceptable way, to be really competent about it, you probably need about 2 years to get in the groove and be a highly productive individual. Of course, there are some instances where the individual is talented naturally with whatever job or position that is, but I find that a year or two is when you start getting comfortable and you can contribute to the company without much hand-holding and or babysitting.
If new entrants into the job market are only spending 3 years in their jobs on average, that means they are going to be spending a third of their career just getting up to speed in their new role. That means a loss in productivity for the companies they work for, right? Wrong. Worker productivity is actually at all-time highs, so that begs the question.
Yeah, that's true. Corporate America has really gotten good at squeezing every ounce of productivity from their employees, to maximize profits and keep the bottom line on a manageable level. that saying that you need 10,000 hours to be proficient at anything, is true. Repetition is what you need to be really good at something. For example, when I was I'm a bartender on the weekends, and I've been doing it for a long time. And it took me about a year or two before I can be really proficient at it, where I excelled and want to be the top performers at the bar that I was working at. And it's the same for any other job. I'm just using my bartending job as a example. So with any position, practice makes perfect. You need your muscle memory. So it takes about that long to be proficient. And at 10,000 hours, you become a master at it, because you've done it for so long. You already know what is needed to perform a task, how much energy you need to expend, and the time it takes. And at that point, also, you are at a level where you can teach other people how to perform that job as well, because you've done it for so long, and you can share that knowledge and wisdom that you have to people who are new to the position.
Is this in spite of lower job security, or because of it? The second reason that job security has been dying is that it's a great motivation tool. If the fear of losing your job is only enough to motivate you to do the bare minimum to avoid that tap on the shoulder, then you should know that companies have responded by moving those goalposts. A study conducted by economists at Manchester and Cardiff University looked at the motivating factor of what they called manufactured job uncertainty. In this report, researchers tried to work out why fears of job security was going up, even when the rates of people being fired from full-time positions was stable.
Yeah, it only makes sense if if your company is undergoing through layoffs, like what happened to me. As I mentioned earlier, the productivity of people who are still there after the first round of layoffs, productivity goes up, right? People want to perform so they can keep their jobs. The downside to that, and this really sucks, the morale of your team just takes a hit, because you just don't know who's next. You see a high-performing person, get laid off, and you're wondering and talking to your peers, and you have these conversations. Hey, hell, he or she got laid off. He or she was really good. If that person can be laid off, what about me? So demoralizing. On top of that, you have to pick up the slack of all the work that is not being done now by the person who left. So you got to pick up that slack. So it's a shitty situation all around.
They did this by comparing companies in America and the UK, who are very happy to lay people off to appease shareholders, to companies in Japan, which has a strong culture of never firing people. A small tangent, but Japanese businesses actually take firing people so seriously that they have an alternative practice called oidashibeya, but this loosely translates to workers' purgatory. According to Japan Intercultural Consulting, a firm that advises businesses operating in the Japanese market, workers' purgatory happens when an employee chronically underperforms in their role. Instead of getting fired, they are typically placed in a room, often windowless, where they have nothing to do. In many cases, their business cards are taken away, and they are forced to do menial, mind-numbing tasks or given nothing to do at all. So yeah, Japanese companies would rather put their workers in solitary confinement than fire them, making them a pretty good contrast to companies in America and the UK. What the economists found was that even when job tenure wasn't actually being reduced by layoffs or firings, changes to corporate control, and especially company mergers or acquisitions, raised uncertainty.
So maybe this is why quiet quitting was coined, right? Gen Z, typically their workforce, are now privy to this phenomenon of your job security is dead, and their outlook on life is not as rosy as the previous generations. So I can see why maybe the younger generation doesn't care as much. I might be wrong. If you are a Gen Z watching this, let me know in the comment section if you do care about your job. But it's the only reason I can think about right now how someone would not care about their job. Just because, hey, I've seen the older generation go through it, I shouldn't be more invested in a company that's not invested in me. And that's one thing I learned about getting laid off for the first time in my life a couple months ago. I need to be looking out more for myself and my future versus the actual company. And just because they don't really care about you, and I've mentioned this a couple times already, you care so much about the company and you give out, you give your life, your energy, your time, and for the end of the day, you're just a number, and it's just the way it is.
Companies notice that by hyping up this uncertainty and making workers compete against each other to maintain their position in a theoretical downsizing, they could get people to work harder. Companies doing this would rank the performance of their teams and compare them to one another, highlight staff errors, and downplay strong performers so that managers and their teams always felt like their job was at risk. The Japanese firms...
Yeah, see, this is bullshit. It shouldn't be that way. Why would you want to work for a company that fosters that kind of environment and that culture? It's just, as an employee, I wouldn't want to have that hanging over my head, thinking that, hey, they could get rid of me at any time. That's another reason why I'm trying to be more independent and be a content creator, just because this is within my power and control. I can put in as much work as I want, and no fucking HR person can just look at my profile without even knowing me and tell me, oh, you know what? Yeah, this person doesn't meet the requirements or whatever it is, and this person should be laid off. So,
despite actually having shorter tenures for managers and operating with more business uncertainty thanks to a weaker overall economy, had a higher sense of job security, mainly thanks to a culture of protecting workers even at the expense of shareholders. In a wonderful twist of fate, though, the study also found that this is not really working on younger employees. Decades of well-publicized layoffs means that younger managers have no expectation of job security, and aren't afraid of losing their jobs as much as older managers who come from a time when people could spend their entire careers with one company. The rank and yank strategy only works to boost productivity for so long. A company should get rid of bad employees, but if it makes everybody feel on edge about their jobs forever, then even the best employees are just going to look for better opportunities elsewhere.
That's exactly the point I was making. I agree with him on this totally. If you are a terrible worker, yeah, you should get fired and lose your job. But in the instances of where the expense of good employees, if the company is hurting, they hang that threat of getting laid off over your head, and it's not fair to the employees. But we can play that game as well if you're an employee and just hop onto another job before that even happens and hopefully get a raise in the interim.
Younger workers have also realized that changing jobs more frequently, especially early in their career, is the best way to move up the corporate ladder and secure pay increases.
Exactly what I just said.
I will say it in every video I can, but if you want to increase your earnings in your career, multiple studies suggest that the best way to do this is to change jobs roughly every 2 years, and always be on the lookout for better opportunities. Companies do not value staff loyalty anymore, because they can't.
True.
And that's the third reason why job security is dying. It costs businesses a lot of money to hire new employees, and then more money to pay them while they're getting good at their job. If they are hiring externally for a more senior position, they will also need to pay that new hire more than an internal promotion. So if
Prior to my job at Tesla, I worked at a corporate company as well. I was a manager. And during COVID, my senior manager, my GM basically, was out for a month. And I was basically left dealing with the staff that I was under my control, for about a month, and I was the only manager left, and I was responsible for everyone and for the business that corporation. And it was probably the most stressful time in my life, in my career, and I gave it my all, and I went above and beyond for that company. And I worked 10, 14-hour days for a month. I would be in the office and I would be so tired that just my mind would be staring at the screen, and like I couldn't work properly at the end of my shifts. And but through that hard work, that month that I was just in charge, my department posted the biggest numbers that they've had during that time period, and I was just so proud of myself for doing that, because my team responded, and I was just really proud of that. And come next period where raises were expected to be given out, I was expecting like a fair raise, especially when I saved them from not having the numbers, the revenue for that period. And I was just expecting, all I wanted was a fair raise, equivalent to what I believe what I'm worth and all the effort that I put in for that time period and going above and beyond for a corporate company. I ended up getting a $2,000 raise for the following year. And to me, that was a slap in the face. $2,000 at that point wasn't even enough to cover inflation. And I told him, hey, I gave you guys my all, and how come I'm only getting this amount of money? And later I found out the new manager that they hired was actually getting paid more than me at that point, who has less experience than me. And so, I learned at that point that to not give everything, not give your life to a corporation here in America. So if you're watching this and if you're pouring your heart and soul for a company here in the US, a corporate company, don't do it. It's not worth your time, not worth your effort, not worth your life and your mental health and your physical health. It's just not worth it. They're out there for themselves. They do not care about you. They do not. You're better off going and putting all your effort, building your own business, building your own brand, because your interests is in your hands. It really is. And for the majority of people, however, you will be working for someone else. But if you're not that type, or going through life, you find out that you'd rather not be that type than going independent and creating your own company and looking out for yourself is the only way to go.
If it makes no sense, then why do companies keep doing this? Well, it's easier. An internal promotion means someone else needs to be promoted to fill that person's position, and someone else needs to be promoted to fill theirs. Now, instead of your company having one employee in a new job, it has 5. Hiring managers could do this, or they could just hire an external candidate that already knows the systems and then get back to scrolling Reddit in their office. Workers also don't believe in job stability either. Things like employee pension plans and career development are all the responsibility of the worker now. And if they are accepting that responsibility, they also want the freedom that comes with it. Some companies like consulting, legal, and accounting firms have built their entire workforce around limited time employees. Overworked, underpaid graduates will stick it out in entry-level roles because they know it looks good on the resume when they apply for a real job in 2 years. Companies can attract high-performing workers by bragging about how secure they are. Even companies that were considered American institutions have fallen apart too many times for people to think that their job is secure. And job security isn't a selling point worth taking a job for because people have learned not to care. So, congratulations, corporate America, you kind of played yourself. There's so much more I want to say on this topic, but it wouldn't make for a good YouTube video. For things like that.
Yeah, so I agree with the last statement there. Job security in corporate America is not a thing anymore. I agree with him saying that nobody cares. I think majority of them cares. I certainly do. But, security, you're not going to find it anywhere but within yourself. And you shouldn't rely on anyone else, not your company, not your parents, not the government. It really is upon you. It really is upon you to secure your future. Thanks for watching, guys. Don't forget to subscribe and follow me for more interesting topics we can talk about.